Hello, my name is Jeremy Morris, and I chose to do my presentation on convictions and the Innocence Project. In order to discuss or get a better understanding of wrongful convictions and what have been going on, I decided to go back and and talk about the history of the racial injustice that have been going on in previous times, within our country. And one of the biggest, issues that were going on during this time was the Jim Crow laws between the 1870s and the 1960s. And the Jim Crow laws were basically a series of anti-black laws that were primarily used in southern and border states, which basically gave a lot of restrictions to people of color, whether it was segregation in schools, not being able to drink out of certain water faucets, not being able to attend certain events or go to certain areas just because of the color of their skin. Also, as well as with that being said, there are also issues with not being able to vote, and one big issue with this, with the wrongful convictions and how this ties in to it is um, during this time of Jim Crow laws, people of color weren't able to vote. So during this time, basically stating that only white people were able to participate as being participate as a juror during trials, um, since people of color wasn't able to vote during this time. And also, with Jim Crow laws and during the time of segregation and discrimination at this time, there were also a high number of incidents where there would be a black offender dealing with a white victim, and the allegations that never ever even made it to trial due to certain a lot of reasons. This whether that's in most cases during this time was the public taking the law into their own hands and seeking their own justice rather than going through the justice system. I mean, like I did state, during the Jim Crow era, there wasn't much needed during this time to convict a person of color, just off of the laws alone that definitely discriminated people of color. Even if the offender was a person of color and had a solid alibi, that could be confirmed. It still really wouldn't matter, which basically meant if the offender was somebody of color, that normally meant that they were guilty, even if they were not. If you are unable to vote, like I did state, you are unable to serve as a juror, which led to a lot of racial bias during this time, especially in southern states. Um, basically, not, them not, getting along with people of color and having their own, racial bias towards people of color, basically, that all people of color are criminals no matter what the circumstances or whatever evidence is presented to them. Um, and like I did say before, many of those cases didn't even go to trial. During this time, there were estimated to be around 3,500 lynchings from 1870s to the 1960s, and also other forms of punishment were used as well. As there were, it could have been beatings and other forms of punishment that they did use during that time. One of the most notable um, people, during this time who case never even made a trial was of Emmett Till, who was, many people already know the story of Emmett Till, who was, brutally beaten for being accused of whistling at a white woman. And, and definitely with that being said, how it ties into wrongful convictions, um, Emmett Till will always, stated or always let it be known that he was innocent. But during this time, like I just stated, if the offender was a person of color, it normally meant that they were guilty. And the woman who was linked to the murder of Emmett Till finally admitted to the claims that um, the accusations that were presented against Emmett Till were in fact false, and that ties into wrongful convictions at this point. How forensic science and technology has definitely aided with wrongful convictions and helping exonerate a lot of different people and for a lot of different reasons with forensic science, through DNA testing, fingerprints, ballistics, etc. DNA testing exonerated more than 300 wrongfully convicted people since its creation, which is tremendous. Just to think about if DNA testing was never invented, how many people would still be serving time wrongfully convicted due to the lack of resources that that basically people that we did not have back then, as well as technology has definitely played a factor into it as far as video evidence, and also satellite locations dealing with cell phones, laptops, GPS systems, and stuff like that that are able to pinpoint a location and in fact let let us know where specific people or where you were at a specific time on a specific date. And that definitely helped. Well, that helped with with the exonerations of wrongful convictions. And the Innocence Project was created in 1992 in New York as a nonprofit organization. The purpose of the Innocence Project is to exonerate wrongfully convicted individuals through DNA testing and law policy reform. So typically, what they will tend to do is, go back and look at old cases that, technology was not around for, and to potentially try and help and see if um, they can potentially help somebody get off, or not necessarily get off, but help prove somebody's innocence through testing that was not created during previous times, as well as with new times now. Um, trying to find, with the Innocence Project, what they tend to do is try and find additional evidence that can aid in proving someone's innocence as well. And just to show how popular this program is, 3,000 prisoners write this organization annually to try and potentially get their case reviewed and to try and help the Innocence Project prove their innocence through DNA testing or any other form of testing as well. So that is my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed.